Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at sectional views. Now sectional views are used on drawings to show the inside details of an object. They'll show the internal construction details that you might not be able to see from a standard orthographic or isometric. So they might be details that aren't obvious from a normal drawing, so any drawing that has hidden detail is going to benefit from a sectional view. Now sectional drawings are usually found in technical specifications, in workshop manuals, construction drawings or any other form of technical illustration. They might even be found in promotional posters to try and give the reader a bit more information about the object. Now every sectional view will include a cutting plane. A cutting plane looks very similar to a centre line, which has a chain line, a long dash, short dash, long dash, short dash, but it will have thicker ends and it will have an arrow pointing in one direction with a label indicator of a letter, typically A, but if you have multiple views it might be B or C. That points in the direction that the cutting plane is going. So if we take this example, you can see a cutting plane going right across it and it passes right through. This shows where it would be cut, so you imagine if you're cutting it with a knife or a saw, this is where the knife would pass straight down. The arrows point to the surface that would be left behind, or the part of the object that would be left behind. When the object's cut, we can see in this view what is left behind. We've got two surfaces where the knife has passed through, and then we've got a hollow surface at the back which the knife or saw hasn't cut through. It's these surfaces that we can see have been sectioned. Now when an object has been sectioned, the surfaces that a knife or saw would have come into contact with are hatched. Hatching is little diagonal lines at 45 degrees which show the specific surfaces which have been cut. Now in this example, a couple of the surfaces have little slopes on them, they're known as webs. They don't get hatched, and that's a different rule we can look at a later time. However, the hatching can be quite clearly seen in some of the other drawings on the page. Now depending on the position of the cutting plane, we will get a different outcome. So taking this plan view, you can see that we've got a sectional elevation BB below it. So the cutting plane is passing right through the middle. The labels and arrows point to the top half of this plan, which is what would be left behind. And below it, what we can see is the result. If you were to cut that and leave the top half of the plan behind, the sectional elevation below it shows what would be the outcome. You can see these two cut surfaces which have been hatched, and you can see this back area here, which is actually an open space. The knife hasn't passed through it, but we can still see that back surface. So that's a big difference. Something that would have been hidden detail is now visible. Lastly, if we look at this view, you can see we have a cutting plane going midway down this surface. The cutting plane goes right through the object, but the labels C and the arrows point down the way, showing that it's the bottom half of this elevation which would be left behind. This means that the top half of the elevation would be completely removed. So when we look at our plan, our sectional plan CC, the top half of that elevation is gone, which means the top half of the plan is gone. Those hatching lines indicate what has been cut, and that circular surface shows exactly where the saw would have passed through. Now lastly, hidden detail is something that's not shown in a sectional view, and the reason for this is that it would become too confusing. The whole point of a sectional view is to remove the need for having hidden detail. So how do we put this into practice? Well, here's an item that we've used previously for our revolve work, this little stopper, and what you can see on the page is that I have an elevation and plan of the object. The plan has a cutting plane going all the way through it, labelled as AA. The arrows point to the top half of the plan, meaning that would be the part that is left behind and is still visible. However, the sectional elevation below it, which is labelled as AA, you can see some hatching line present, and you can see that part of the object has been cut. What this means is that cutting plane has cut through it, and below it we can now see a sectional elevation. To create our own sectional views, what we have to do is start with a blank sheet or an existing drawing sheet. What we would then do is, like normal, we place our base view, selecting base and trying to find the object we want to place in first. So in this case I'd be looking for the little stopper part that I've created. I insert that by choosing open. I then have the option of putting a front view, like an elevation, or in this case what I'm going to do is put in a plan view. So instead of doing the conventional elevation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my view cube, rotate it down the way so I can see the top of the object, the plan of the object, and click OK. I'm going to keep it at a large scale of 5:1 just for visibility. Having selected that, I can now click and drag the red outline and position it on the page. And at this point what I'm able to do is choose section, select the view that I want to section, which is this one. I'm then going to hover near the centre of my object so that the little dot goes green. I'll slowly move out to the left and position my cursor just on the left of the page in line with that centre point. Click once and then move my mouse slowly across, keeping it horizontally, and then click again. I'll then right click and choose continue. Now automatically this allows me to place a sectional elevation directly below the plan with the cutting plane. I could change my view identifier to A because it's the first sectional view on the page. I then can click OK and that will position my view where I want it. Unfortunately the little label comes in above it, so what we need to do is first of all drag the view down and then move the position of the label AA just below the object. And now what that lets us see is that we have a plan view with a cutting plane and a sectional elevation below it showing the inside of that object. I'll position this over to the left of the page because now what we're going to do is we're going to see the difference between creating a sectional end elevation. Again I go to base, again I choose the same part, click open and place it, but this time I'm going to leave it as an elevation with the same scale. You can see the hidden detail is present, so that's going to be really useful when we add our cutting plane because it means that there's something meaningful inside to show in our sectional view. Again I go up to section, select the view that I want to section, I'll hover near the middle, getting that green dot, and then click above the object once, move my mouse cursor down and click again, and then right click continue. And this time I can see my sectional end elevation. Now the view identifier has come in as D, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to B, and then I'm going to place my object out on the right hand side. Now what I've been able to produce is a sectional end elevation of the object, which is different from our sectional elevation which we had earlier. One of the key things to remember when producing sectional views is that you shouldn't move the sectioned view after you've created it. For example, if I took this sectional elevation and moved it from the right hand side where it belongs over to the left hand side, this would mean that my direction arrows now face the wrong way. This would show that the left hand side remains, but it would mean that the section view is actually showing the hidden detail from the opposite side, which means the section is wrong and the cutting plane is wrong. So whenever you place a sectional view, do not move it from its position to make sure you keep it correct. Remember that if you're asked for a sectional elevation, you need to make sure that your cutting plane is going through the plan so you get your sectional elevation. And if you're asked for a sectional end elevation, your cutting plane must go through the elevation.